Hello and welcome to Building the Premier Accounting Firm. I'm your host, Roger Kinect, president of Universal Accounting Center. For more than 20 years, I've been working with accounting professionals to help them start, build, and operate successful bookkeeping, accounting, tax businesses to literally offer quality accounting services and get paid what they're worth. It's in this process that we talk about on this show various things such as marketing, sales, pricing, client onboarding, training staff, mental health, and so much more as it relates to running and operating successful businesses. Each and every week, I bring on the show experts, guests, to actually address various things that are very important for us to consider and implement for ourselves and for our clients. And today's going to be no exception. I'm excited to have on the show Adam Carroll. Adam actually is someone that is what I would consider to be a money expert. Through his use of the shred method, Adam Carroll paid off his home in a record time, saving over $180,000 in interest in the process. He actually is sharing his strategy with the world in order to help people free themselves to be themselves. Adam has published 4 books, basically his expertise in those books. He's produced an award-winning documentary on student loan debt, has a TEDx talk that you can actually view with over 5 million views now, and has helped people achieve true financial freedom in their lives. More than financial freedom, Adam is all about helping people achieve time freedom, relationship freedom, and service freedom. So Adam, welcome to the show.
Roger, thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to see where our conversation leads.
You bet. Well, first of all, you and I, we're dealing with money. So obviously in the accounting space, we see it, we work with it, we help people with it. But you and I both know that not everyone has a healthy relationship with money. How would you describe some of the toxic things that people experience as it relates to their money?
There are things that most people, Roger, don't even know that are bubbling up from their youth, candidly. There is a statistic out there that says that between the age of 0 and 9, someone's money personality is shaped. So if you think about, and I love to go back in time and think about how old were my parents when I was 0 to 9, and how successful were they financially in those days? And the answer is not very. Most people are having kids in their 20s, maybe 30s. And if someone has children in their 40s or later, it's a way different experience generally that child has around money. So you think about the messages that were given when you are young, that is really what's bubbling up and where some of that toxicity comes from.
This is fascinating. I'm glad you've gone here because in my own youth, I do have very distinct memories of money and how I was introduced to it, let's say. So let me just share with you a few and see if you have any thoughts on it. I do distinctly remember when my father became unemployed. He was unemployed for about a year or so. And I remember one day my father having a nightmare wherein he, during the nightmare, thought someone had broken into our home. And in the breaking in, he was kicking against the dresser and split his heel open, and had a pretty severe gash that occurred because of the stress and anxiety he was experiencing while being unemployed. And I remember him taking some side jobs during that period and struggling. Likewise, at the exact same time, in the neighborhood in which I lived, I was in the poorest neighborhood part of the area, wherein my high school consisted of not just our poor area, but we had probably one of the richest areas in the metropolitan area in where I lived. So we had people that were in gated communities where the kids had sports cars. I remember going to one house where they had 2 baby grands in the home.
Wow.
And so I saw the difference between being on government assistance. I remember my parents bringing home a block of cheese once, and it came from the assistants, and seeing people that had wealth and family that had wealth. So I had those 2 dichotomies, and I had to wrestle with going without and going to secondhand stores to get my school clothing versus friends of mine that were wearing the stylish new clothing, jeans, and so forth. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I'm curious, Roger, have you been an entrepreneur your entire life?
No.
When did you go out on your own, if you will?
Well, interestingly enough, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a true entrepreneur. I did not start the business that I'm in.
Okay.
I did start some businesses when I was younger. But the business that I'm currently the president of started back in 1979, and I'm the third president of the company.
Okay.
And so my journey through this and my experience working with entrepreneurs isn't that I never once had to put a second mortgage on my home
Right.
to do this. However, running the company, I have had to go without payroll
Yeah.
to pay my vendors and to pay my employees and go home
Sure.
to my wife and explain to my wife that we didn't have money to make the mortgage this month, or we didn't have the funds to buy groceries this week.
Yeah.
And I've had those conversations because as president of the company, I didn't have money in the bank to make my bills as a business. And so I've been fortunate enough that I didn't start the company. I had something established that I was able to take the helm of, but I've gone through the fears and scares that many have experienced and that I've worked with my clients as
Yeah.
business owners through.
Yeah, what's interesting is you are very intrapreneurial from my perspective.
Uh-huh.
So within that company, you're doing all sorts of creative things to make the business go and
Yes.
working with lots of entrepreneurs. And my sense, having listened to a few of your episodes, is you care deeply about their financial well-being, their emotional health, their mental health, et cetera, in addition to their ability to build that business. So one other quick question for you, or
Yeah,
two, actually.
please.
How old were you when your father was laid off, or when he went through that period?
So I would have been my just preteen.
Okay,
Preteen is when that was.
yeah. So at a preteen level, you had probably a fairly firm understanding of wants and needs and money, and obviously you're seeing the dichotomy of sort of the haves and the have-nots in your neighborhood. What we do as young people is we assign a meaning to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this because I had a very similar experience. My dad worked for a division of Massey Ferguson Combine Corporation. They were a combine manufacturer years and years ago. The big
Okay.
red, gigantic combines
Yeah,
that take
the farmers
corn.
use.
Yeah, right. And so he was a salesperson for Massey, and Massey went out of business. They went bankrupt. And I remember very distinctly my mom saying, "Your dad had a bad day at work, and he could be getting laid off, and then we'll be out of a home." And it was that
Mm.
quick, like 1, 2, 3 were homeless in my mom's mind, because she grew up in a different household where there was that experience where they had,
Yeah.
they had gotten foreclosed on and gotten kicked out. Um, I knew enough to know that wasn't the case, that you can't go from you have a bad day at work to you're homeless in a week. It's not realistic. But what I did was I put meaning on that I was never going to work for anyone for the rest of my life or for any length
Yeah.
of time.
Or
If
be
I
put
was,
in that situation.
that's right, never be put in the situation. So the meaning for me was about if it is to be, it's up to me. I'm not going to allow some
Love
corporate
it.
muckety mucks to determine whether or not I can feed my family or pay my mortgage.
Yeah, what you're describing there is similar to a conversation I had with my wife and my son. We've had this conversation multiple times because we went to the children and explained we had to cut back some expenses.
Yeah.
And this is while I was president of Universal Accounting.
Yeah.
So we had some struggles years and years ago. Fortunately, things are phenomenal now. But at that time, he was a very young teenager. This was maybe about 10 years ago. Um, we told the family we had to cut back on expenses, and we may not be able to go and do some of the things we had been doing, eating
Yeah.
out and so forth. But at the same time, my wife said, we're still going to be able to go on the vacation we had scheduled.
Yes.
And my son, this is a very traumatic experience. My son was so frustrated with my wife to say, why are we going on vacation when you're clearly telling us that finances aren't good? And my wife was trying to say, but we've already set the funds aside. We already have the money. It's already planned. And it's not going to be this debt on the family. So we can go experience this.
Yep.
And he became so frustrated and upset that the two of them got to the point where my wife had to leave the house. She went out the front door so upset that he just wouldn't listen to her and
Yes.
trust her that we had the means to still go on the vacation.
Right.
But you can imagine the tension that's going on there.
100%.
And I bring it up because my son has referenced that discussion on numerous occasions after the fact.
Yeah, it's what's amazing about that is that I've heard similar stories like that. One in case in point, a young man said his dad owned basically it was a construction company of sorts. And they lived in this big, beautiful home that he had just built.
Mm.
And he said, son, we're broke. We're broke. We can't afford, and it was things like go out to eat. We can't afford to buy you new cleats for baseball or what have you.
Yeah.
And he said, I was so conflicted because here we're living in this beautiful home. My dad's driving a brand new truck and he's telling me we're broke. And it was hard to reconcile the two. And I
Yes.
think what it does, and your son probably would articulate this even now, is that there is an emotional attachment we have to money. We don't know exactly what it is, but reportedly there are over 100 different emotions that people have related to money. So when there is conflict around money, it could be fear. It could be they could have abandonment issues from early on. There could be that experience of insecurity that they never want to have this particular experience again that they did before. I've heard families that have financial squabbles that, oh, we're not going to invite Uncle Nick to the wedding because, he got the farm and we didn't, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the emotions that are tied to money are almost inextricably linked, to how we interact with money today if we're not intentional about identifying what it is and then building a strong relationship to money.
Well, I think everyone that's listening can identify with this from their own personal experiences, good or bad.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to transition because I want to take this and now go somewhere. But before I go any further, you brought up this perspective of money.
Yeah.
And I want to say that I do distinctly remember after being raised the way I did, you remember how you made the statement of if it's got to be, it's up to me.
Yep.
I remember that. I did not want to believe I was going to be a burden on anyone.
Yes.
And that I wanted to be self-sufficient, self-sustaining. That was hugely important to me. But when I finally learned about money being abundant and having an abundant mindset,
Yes.
that coupled with the independence that I had already determined has been it's been life-changing.
Yeah.
My life is so much different and better now because I have the work ethic coupled with this abundance mindset
Yes.
that I feel limitless at this point. And that's what's fun. It's liberating. It's inspiring. So there's a lot of people that would like to get to that point and would love to experience it, but they're dealing with debt. They've either had life come at them with medical expenses and so forth, or just poor decisions when younger where they're burdened with debt. What do you want to say about debt, and is there a way to get out of it? You got out of the house and paid it off, so tell us about that.
I did. I have this theory that in society today, particularly in America, that debt is normal, natural, and good. And we have sort of celebrated and highlighted, look at what I can buy, but what we don't highlight is I bought it all on, 10 years.
Credit.
Yeah, on credit, on 10 years from now's income. And I for the longest time, I spoke on college campuses. I've been on 750 different college campuses in the last 15 years. And I would teach them about money. And what I would say is, you can have everything you want in life, everything, but you can't have it at 22. And someone will try and sell it to you at 22 because they get paid to do that. And you could probably qualify for everything that you've ever wanted, the bigger home and the Maserati or whatever it is you're after. But you'll be paying for it when you're 32 and 42 and 52 and 62. And so what occurred to me early on in my life was that, and this was word that I got from a mentor around money. And what he told me, Roger, was the two greatest expenses that we'll have in life are taxes and the interest expense on debt. And he said, if you figure out how to minimize taxes, which you can do through the use of a good tax accountant and a good CPA and someone who knows their salt, investing in real estate, having a business that you can write, personal expenses as business expenses, those kinds of things. He said, if you focus on that and you focus on how to minimize the interest expense on debt, wealth building takes care of itself. Because you've automatically cut out two of the largest expenses, maybe not entirely, but you've minimized two of the largest expenses that most people have that keeps them in that paycheck to paycheck life cycle.
So I was raised with the principle of you're either paying or earning interest.
Yeah.
And anytime that you're paying interest. You want to get rid of that so that you're earning interest. And then the game becomes, can you make more and more interest?
That's right.
But the first thing is you want to avoid as much as possible the debt. But to your point about our economy, we're a debt-driven economy.
We are.
So much of what we do is based upon debt.
Yep.
It astounds me how we're able to flippantly throw around the trillions of dollars that we are in debt, and the people that are in the know shruggishly throw it off and say, "Oh no, that's that's the way we do business.
Yeah.
That's how we run things around here. Debt's good. The more debt you can get, the better." And people subscribe to that mindset.
Yep.
And I think it destroys marriages. It causes depression. It brings about suicide.
Yep.
It destroys people when they finally realize they are chained by what it is that they have. And a good example is just being upside down in a house or in a car.
Yep.
You can have a vehicle. And today, while we're recording this, I know that in the repo world, there's a lot of this going on where people, just a year or two ago when the used car market or new car market was such, they would take the vehicle that they were underwater in, so it was worth less than they owed. They would take what they traded in, they take that difference and they put it on top of the next loan.
Yep.
So that $45,000 car with taxes became $49,000, but with the extra that was carried over from the previous vehicle, they've got a $45,000 car that they've got a $55,000 loan on.
Right.
They're upside down.
Right.
And they manage with it for a period of time and then all of a sudden realize this is not healthy.
Yeah.
This is not good. I need to get out of it. So tell us about you getting out of debt with your home. What motivated you to do that? And do you have any comments on what I just shared?
Yeah. First of all, I love the comment about the car thing because, I think most people are driving around their net worth and it's a depreciating asset.
Yeah.
And in doing what you just described, where they, 3 years in, well, I want a new car and this one's depreciated so much and I'm upside down, so I'm going to go roll this into the next loan. What those who are not in the know don't understand is the people selling you that next vehicle are saying, what do you want your payment to be?
Yes.
They're not saying, here's how much debt you have and here's how much interest is going to be charged. And oh, by the way, you're going to be upside down 15,000 on the next one. They don't tell you that. They just say, what do you want your payment to be? And the way that they create that, as I'm sure many of your listeners know, is they just extend the term. So
that's where I was going to go.
7-year, 8-year, 10-year car loans are the norm now. I saw that Elon Musk wants to sell Teslas now at a 10-year term.
Oh my gosh.
And it's a throwback to when I was in the mortgage business and we were doing routinely 40-year fixed mortgages and they were talking about adding a 50-year fixed mortgage.
Yeah.
And it was just to keep the payment down so people could afford it. So to your point about, we just keep printing more money. And like you, and I have an abundant mindset, money is the most plentiful thing in the world. There's $4 trillion circulating the globe every day. And all we have to do is have a little teaspoon in that flow in order to have a fair amount in our pocket all the time. So create value, add value, find a way to dip that teaspoon in, have multiple teaspoons if you can to grab some of the money. But the reality of printing more and more is that your $500,000 home is not worth $1 million. It's that the dollars are worth less and less and less. So we have to inflate the price of the home in order to make it feel like, no, we're actually getting ahead somewhere in life.
Yeah.
Right. So the thing with the home for me and how we got out of debt, candidly, was when I graduated from my state university, I was a debt statistic. And I had a reasonable amount, Roger, 30 grand or so in student loan debt. But I had $8,000 in credit card debt. I was upside down on my car. The running joke is my dog had just died at home. My girl had left me at school. I sounded like every Dierks Bentley song ever written. And I realized that if I was going to get ahead financially, I had to get out of debt because the debt is actually what was keeping me, held down. It wasn't allowing me to go do what I wanted to do. Where in my intro, you said, free yourself to be yourself. I couldn't be myself because I wasn't free. I just had all this debt that I had to pay. And lucky for me, I met a woman my senior year in college who said, get rid of your debt or I'm going to get rid of you. And I was like, well, that seems pretty harsh, but also fairly smart. And you seem like you have it all together. And
she didn't want to inherit your debt.
She didn't want to inherit my debt. And we've been married for 23 years. We have 3 beautiful little dividends out of our merger, as I like to say. And and yet we figured out early on how we wanted to live life differently financially than the way both of our parents did. And so the way we did that was we would live on one income, and the other income we would use to blast away debt as fast as possible. And so I would say it was the first probably 10 years of our marriage where we had blasted away debt in the first 2 years. And then we basically lived debt free with the exception of a mortgage for about 8 or 9 years. And then one day I started digging into some of the strategies that I'd learned. And I said, I think if we go hard to the hoop on this, we get really intentional, really diligent, we can have our home knocked out in 4 or 5 years. And my wife said, well, let's do it. And in the end, 3.7 years later, we had our $270,000 mortgage completely paid off. And we'd saved 180 grand in interest in the process. And then what we realized afterwards, Roger, was the magic, which is when you have a significant amount of discretionary income, your wealth building capability just magnifies exponentially. And so the goal really isn't to build a bigger lifestyle, it's to build a bigger life and to have tons of what I call your life quotient, that discretionary income, to apply towards building real wealth for the future.
These stages that you're sharing here, I think, are hugely important to emphasize. One, I love the fact that you're able to, as a couple, identify that one of the incomes was going to be devoted to getting out of debt. I think that's a huge takeaway from this conversation. The second thing is the liberation that comes when you are debt-free.
Yeah.
Living within your means is liberating. And the stresses that exist, especially in a relationship, just talking about the relationship, when you can alleviate one of the most negative things, which is financial stresses on a relationship, and remove that from the quotient, all of a sudden, that one thing that could be the stress that undoes the relationship, you removed it. It's gone because now you're living within your means. The other thing that I want to point out is how liberating it is individually. All of a sudden, the self-esteem that you must have as a person to know that you aren't in debt. You owe no one else. And that's huge. So kudos at that stage. The next stage is now the opportunity to build wealth. You're able to fully fund your HSA, your 401k. You're able to actually start planning for the future. You're able to have a rainy day fund for that emergency when the refrigerator goes out, when the car needs tires. All of a sudden, when you take the kid to the emergency room and you have that that $1,000 ER room visit, it doesn't break the bank because you have that emergency fund. When you're transitioning from one job to another or whatever life might bring, you have something to lean back on. But now it takes you to the next stage where all of a sudden you're able to start building wealth, plan for the retirement, which brings us to the next one, which is generational wealth. So there's this evolution, and each of these are huge milestones. Can you reflect back on the emotion of what you and your wife experienced as you paid off the house, and then the next stage where you maybe felt like you were on the trajectory to building wealth?
Yeah, and I appreciate the question immensely because going back to what we said earlier about how emotional money is and the emotional ties to money, my wife, she grew up in a household where her parents both worked very hard, but they didn't make a lot of money early on. And they've done very well for themselves after the kids left, which is what happens with most families. But she grew up where there was fear, there was lack, there was insecurity around money. And I remember she would freak out about the littlest things. Well, what if this happens? And what if this happens? And I remember reading a book early on in our young marriage. The book was called Smart Couples Finish Rich by David Bach. And in the book, David Bach says men and women have different risk tolerances. And you need to ask your significant other, how much do you need in savings to feel safe and secure at any given point in time? And I remember asking my wife this. It was over breakfast one morning, and I said, honey, how much do you need in savings to feel safe and secure? I'm reading this book and blah, blah, blah. And without skipping a beat, Roger, she goes, $30,000. And I thought, we're 25 at the time. And I thought she'd hit the Listerine too hard that morning. I was like, you're nuts.
She swallowed.
Yeah, that's right. And she said, you asked, that's my number. And the reason I bring it up is we were in our debt payoff mode at that point. It was all about how much can we send to the debt to get it knocked out,
Yeah, not savings.
not
Yes.
savings. And yet, when she said, "You asked, that's how much I need," what occurred to me is there are probably couples everywhere that have never asked each other this question. So you may have $2,000 in mind, and your significant other has 20,000 in mind, and there will always be stress between the two of you because neither one of you has hit your number. Or if you've hit 2,000, the 20,000 is like, it's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough.
Yeah. I'm loving this conversation, truly loving, because I can relate to it.
Yeah.
I remember meeting with our financial planner, and this was back when we were in our 20s, and we were trying to set goals. What's the next thing we should be working towards? And fortunately, we were at the point where we were out of debt other than our home. That was the only thing. That was the only debt we had left, is the house. At that point, he said, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to build up a rainy day fund. I want you to put $10,000 in the bank. When my wife and I left that meeting, my wife said, is he crazy? Is he insane? How are we going to have $10,000 in the bank? Now, fast forward to today, I can tell you that my wife's, what we call hour zero, hour zero is not $10,000 in the bank. It's much higher than that. And she's beyond it because she wants the cushion.
Totally.
So you are so well to say that this discussion is essential, because there is a sense of confidence and security that comes from that,
100%.
that if and when life happens, we'll be okay. And I've taught it to my children. My son that I shared a moment ago, his memory of that particular incident, he's now married, and married as he is, he's running the finances for the home and helping manage all that. Well, his phone just broke this last weekend.
Yeah.
We were together as a family for a vacation, and while we're together, his phone, long story, but it's broken, and he needs to get a phone. Because he has his own rainy day fund, there wasn't gnashing of teeth, wailing of spirits. It wasn't this, it's going to break the bank. We're dead. We can't do anything now on vacation because we've got this phone to fix.
Totally.
My phone's broken. I'm going to have to get a new one when we get back home. That was the end of it.
Yep. It does. It creates this level of just clear water where normally it would be super choppy for most families on things like this. And in relation to your question about what did we experience as we went through, when we were debt-free at 25 or 26, my wife was 26, I was 25, paid the last, consumer debt or car loan or whatever it was.
Yep.
There was this feeling of, oh my gosh, let's go get a $12 bottle of wine instead of the $3 bottle of $3.
You got to celebrate.
$3 Chuck from Trader Joe's. So we celebrated a little bit. And then I said, hey, listen, we now have $4,000 a month in discretionary income.
Yes.
How long will it take us to get to 30? And she's like, 7.5 months. And I said, then let's do it. So we put 30 grand in the bank. And from that point forward, Roger, my wife and I have had, I can count the number of financial arguments we've had on one hand, right? So less than 5 in our 23 years after, let's call it 18 years after we got that done. And then when we did the house, now this is one thing I want to mention to your listeners. Don't do what I did. I went to the bank and I stroked the last check and I just paid the mortgage off, and I called her and I said, hey, good news. I just made the last payment on the mortgage. And she was like, why did you do that without me? I was supposed to be there with you. So this is a momentous deal. You want to make sure you include both spouses on it. But the feeling once we did that, to your point of, listen, we can withstand anything because there is no gigantic bill that we're facing at some point. And it's really shaped how cash flow works in our family and how we're investing and how we look at what we spend and where we spend. It's what I think ultimately it's what my deployment here has been. And I figured it out a little bit later in life, maybe, but a speaker I heard one time said, we're not put on this earth to be employed. We're put on this earth to be deployed. And I figured out my deployment is helping people figure out you can use your cash flow in different ways that will create financial freedom in short order.
I love this. So you mentioned earlier on that you have 3 dividends.
Yeah.
What are your dividends learning from all of this? What do you hope they're learning?
Well, going back in the Wayback Machine here in 2015, I did a TED Talk at the London Business School, and it was all about a game of Monopoly that I played with my kids, but I used real cash on the table.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the reason I did it, Roger, was I was watching my kids play, but it was like the money was irrelevant. They were just there to roll dice and move pieces. And I saw similarities in all the college students that I'd presented to that were buying things and spending money because they were in this 4-year bubble where money is irrelevant. They can spend, you can spend and spend and spend on a college campus, and the bill won't come due for 4.5 to 5 years. And so I wanted to make money very real, very tangible for them. And what we did was we implemented an allowance program. We taught them money. And by the age of about 14 or 15, they never once asked for another dollar from us. And our kids are financially viable. I have a 20-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 16-year-old. My 16-year-old's a hardworking kid. He's putting money away. He's into investments. My 18-year-old probably has more investments than most 30 and 40-year-olds. And my 20-year-old just has her head on straight. She's going to go through school, get as many scholarships as she can. She thrift store shops. She said, I may be in a career that doesn't make a lot of money, but I'm going to be really intelligent with the money I have. Yeah. And I just feel like they've gleaned from us that delayed gratification wins, that wealth is not a measure of money, it's a measure of time. Yeah. And I think they're living accordingly. And my hope beyond all hopes is that by 30 or 35, all three of them are financially free.
I think it's beautiful. I want to go back to your Monopoly game. I do remember that from your TED Talk. And correct me, was it $9,000?
It was 10 grand. Yeah,
10 grand. Okay, so 10 grand.
10 grand.
What was it like to go to the bank and ask for 10 grand in cash in the denominations you needed to play the game?
Well, it was funny. I had a little slip of paper and I was like, here are all the denominations of bills I need. And the woman's like, what are you doing with this? And I said, I'm going to the casino. Don't worry about it, And then she goes, no, really? I said, I'm playing Monopoly. These are all the Monopoly numbers, but I can't, other than a $500 bill, which you can still buy on eBay, a little quick stat there. You can buy a $500 bill on eBay, but it'll cost you about $700 or $800.
Okay, not doing that.
So I went in, I asked for the money. Obviously it was probably the largest withdrawal that they had seen in cash in a while. And,
You broke the vault.
I broke the vault. Yeah. And it does make you wonder, how much actual cash does the bank have on hand? Because and this is, again, a total sidebar comment, but if our banking system collapsed, or if our credit and debit system collapsed, there is enough cash and currency in the world right now that money in banks would last about 1.5 days.
Yeah.
And there'd be about enough for about $1,200 per person in the US.
It doesn't take much to really do a run on the bank, by the way.
It wouldn't take much at all.
Yeah. If a few people went to the bank and asked like you did for $10,000, very quickly they would have nothing and they'd have to shut the door.
They'd have to move money in from somewhere or something, right? So it was what was, I think, even more impactful for me was having my kids see 10 grand. And for me to say, what do you think? Oh, it's a lot of money. It's more money I've ever seen. And I said, it is. And one day you'll easily be able to accumulate this amount of money. Yeah, this is not insurmountable. Kind of like your wife was like, is he crazy? 10 grand?
Yeah.
But when you realize you can do it, then it becomes like, oh, it's not a big deal.
So when I play Monopoly, it's inevitable that I'm going to find one of the bills in like the under the couch, or behind a cushion somewhere else. Did you end up counting the money, and was there anything missing out of the 10 grand when you went to put it back?
Oh, we frisked them for sure. I mean, we shook them down big time. But my son won $6,800. He didn't get to keep it all, but he won $6,800 in the game. Mm-hmm. The winner ended up getting $40. Second place got $20. Third place got $10. And
so they actually left the game with something.
They left the game with something. Yeah. And all the researchers out there were like, well, this research study you did should only have one variable, and you put multiple variables. And I was like, I was just trying to teach a lesson here. But
and do you think they learned it?
I'm sure they did.
I know they did.
Yep.
any child at that age seeing that much cash and be able to play with it and move it and pay for things with it, I truly believe experience something. Today, any child that actually gets to buy things with cash versus seeing mom and dad swipe the card,
Yep.
just to go through the motion of handing over something that has value, $10, $20, $50, to hand that over and say it's yours is so different than the experience of using a card. And
Yes.
so for a child to experience that,
Yep.
the physical nature of money, very important. So I loved your example and how you shared it on the TED Talk.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. So this brings me to, with time running so short, the shred method.
Yeah.
You've got a philosophy here, a process that you use to help people that are in debt. And I think it's important to recognize that although we've been speaking of this in hindsight, that you and I apparently are in a financial secure situation, many of my listeners are not,
Yep.
and would love a way to get out of it. One, personally, I'm sure as accounting professionals, as much as we work with money, it doesn't mean we're flush with it,
Yep.
but also our clients, even my clients. I've dealt with clients that just aren't making very prudent decisions when it comes to the money they're making
Right.
professionally in their businesses or even personally. So let's talk about the shred method.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to even share it, Roger, because this again is part of my deployment, I think, here on this planet. First of all, I mentioned that the two greatest expenses, taxes and the interest expense on debt.
Mhm.
One of the things that we have been programmed to believe or to live our lives by is that, well, why would I ever pay off my mortgage? I get to write off the interest, right? It's a great
I've heard
deduction.
that. Yep.
And yet in 2017, the tax code changed, and a couple can write off $25,900 in a standard deduction. So when they file their taxes, regardless if you have 25.9 or not in mortgage interest, you can take 25.9 as a standard deduction. If it's more than that, then you'd want to itemize. But to be more than that, you'd have to have a pretty significant mortgage at a pretty significant interest rate. So the majority of people out there that are homeowners actually could already get the interest deduction that they are entitled to in the standard deduction. So we strip away the excuse of like, I love my mortgage, I get to write off my interest expense.
Yes.
The second thing that I like to bring up to people is that the money that we make is largely inefficient. And I'm going to pose a question to you that will articulate how inefficient it is. If you were to leave your house, Roger, on a Saturday morning at, like, let's say 7:30 or 8, and you were going to go to the grocery store, and then you came back home, unloaded the groceries, knowing that you had to go to the post office before it closed at 2 p.m., would you leave your car idling in the driveway all morning and into the afternoon?
No.
Why wouldn't you?
Well, there's a few reasons. One, it's unnecessary expense on the gas. I don't need to utilize my vehicle because it's burning on the engine. It's causing wear and tear is what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
But the second thing is I'm conscious of the environment, right? But the third is it's using gas, and gas is a commodity that I've paid for that isn't cheap, that is being burned through unnecessarily.
Interesting.
What am I gaining burning the gas? I'm not going anywhere. The car's not doing anything, and yet here I am idling it in my front driveway.
Precisely. And what it all points to is inefficiencies, right? It's an inefficiency on the resource. It's hard on the environment, hard on the vehicle. Yet this is what most of us do when we get paid. Money goes into our checking account, ostensibly. It sits there for a period of time until we do ACH transactions or debit card swipes, and slowly but surely it starts to go down. But I would bet my last dollar that the majority of your listeners have some amount of money sitting in savings or checking for an extended period of time, days, weeks, months on end. And it sits there, and some of it might be emergency fund money, some of it may be a sinking fund, et cetera. But we do that, we leave it there, and it's like letting your car idle in the driveway, knowing that you have to pay a bill or go to the post office later in the month. And all the while, that inefficiency is you have amortized debts in probably in the amounts of hundreds of thousands of dollars if you have a mortgage that you are paying interest on every single month. And that discretionary money, that extra money that's sitting there, if it sits there, what do you think most people do with it? If money is just sitting and checking, what happens to it?
Well, I'm presuming that if they're trying to do a rainy day fund, they probably have a new zero that they say the checking account won't go below so that I don't end up with an insufficient fund transaction or something. So they
Yep.
have a new zero rather than the ultimate zero. But likewise, they might move it into something like a savings account, a money market, a CD,
Yep.
and hopefully acquire greater interest.
Right. So hopefully they're making interest on it. Hopefully it's being moved into something that's not as touchable. But for the majority of folks out there, painting with a very broad brush, the majority of money that sits idle in a checking account is spent at Target, Costco, and dining out. Because people who look at their account and go, well, I've got $500. I might as well go out to eat, or I've got $1,000. That that $400 kayak at Costco is pretty cool. I think I'll just go ahead and buy it. And so one of our theories with Shred is that lazy, idle money is dangerous money.
Oh, yeah.
Lazy, idle money sitting there is just like it's just an invitation to go shopping, to go to the mall.
For many, it's burning a hole in their pocket.
Totally. And the way we look at it is that money, if it's circulating through your system well, and the Shred method is based on a complex algorithm that's essentially, I'm going to get nerdy here, it's creating interest rate arbitrage. So if you can borrow a little bit of money and put it against your amortized debts, and maybe you spend a small fraction of it in interest, but you're saving hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on the mortgage that you're paying down, you do that over and over and over again, you're going to be well ahead of the game in short order. And so what we teach people how to do is by reorienting your cash flow through a very simple vehicle that almost everyone has access to, which is either a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, a personal line of credit, a PLOC, or a business line of credit, a BLOC. By running your income through there, and the system, the software that powers the Shred method, will tell you, based on your income, based on your expenses, and the timing of everything, send $3,458.62 to your mortgage. And when you do that, what you're doing is you're accelerating the amortization table by months and months and months,
Yes.
sometimes years. And you're avoiding the interest expense that you would normally pay in order to get to that month in the AM table. And we have helped now dozens of people pay off their home and hundreds of people create massive amounts of equity in their home. But also what they're really doing is they begin to pay down their debts quickly and free up all that discretionary income, that life factor, so that they can begin creating wealth sooner. Does this make sense?
So would you refer to this as a debt consolidation tool, or would you say it's something different or more?
We call it debt acceleration, not consolidation, because we're not necessarily just going and saying, get a HELOC and roll all your debts in right away. It's really more about where can we create more spread between what you make and what you spend? And then what do you do with that spread in order to knock down your debts really quickly and create equity?
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
So this whole Shred philosophy, once it's embraced, you're saying that there's a software that can more or less tell us what to do. But do you find that it also changes how people think about money, how they treat money? Is it a philosophical and emotional change?
Yes.
Does that come from the Shred method?
You were spot on. When my wife and I started using Shred and we blasted away, we were in the process of blasting away the mortgage. And I said to my wife, are you concerned about, we've halted 529 contributions. We are not putting money away for the kids' braces. We don't have a sinking fund for the vacation or the roof if something goes wrong, the car repair. And she said, Adam, it's all there. It's always there. It's always been there. It's sitting right there in the equity of our home. If we need it, we just access it. But because of Shred, this thing, when you do it long enough, and long enough, Roger, would be like 18 months, 12 to 18 months, 24 months, it becomes like a video game you can't lose. So long as there is income being put in and your expenses are less than what you make, it really feels like a video game you can't lose.
Wonderful. Well, I hope that just the game analogy intrigues enough people to come play, because it is something worth doing. My feeling about life in general and about finances is so much better when those things aren't looming over our heads.
Yeah.
And like I shared earlier on, I've experienced it personally and I've experienced it professionally. And when you're dealing with it personally, it's very personal because it's your family, it's you, it's your livelihood, it's a reflection on you as a person, and you do take it that way. But when you do deal with it professionally, especially when running a business, you're dealing with other people's livelihoods, other
Yeah.
people's mortgages, other people's well-being, and the stresses there are hugely impactful. And I think what we're discussing today is so important, especially for my audience, the accounting professionals, as it applies to them and the clients that we're working with. So I really appreciate this. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to break for a moment here and do a summary of what we've discussed so far, and then I'm going to come back to you for a closing thought. So as I do this, I do want to point out that in the episode description for my listeners, Adam's provided here a great opportunity for you to get access to the shred method and at the same time do so saving. He's provided for us a discount that you can take advantage of in the episode description that I want to invite you to do. It's here because you're a listener of the show that you'll be able to save $200 off the registration price for the program and a free month of the software that powers the shred method. So definitely go to the episode description, take advantage of that opportunity, and see what you can do to actually take a more proactive approach to your debt, become debt-free, and put yourself on a trajectory towards wealth. So definitely do so. In addition to that, we're going to be putting in the episode description also a free link to get the money management course. The money management course is a specific program designed to actually help you understand what it is to properly manage your personal funds, how to manage a household. And it's very much like this Monopoly experience that Adam was sharing at the beginning. So I encourage you to go take advantage of this. This is a course that was initially designed for newlyweds, for helping them understand how they should consider running their household, that I would encourage you to take advantage of. And in addition to that, you'll also receive a free access to or copy of the couples course. This is something that is intentionally designed to help us with the relationships that we have in our lives with those people that we hold so dear to ourselves. So definitely go take advantage of these two opportunities, the shred method and the money management course with the couples course. And with that said, one of the things I would like to just summarize is I think Adam's journey here is quite impactful. It's something that I believe we can all relate to. If you go back to the debts that we all incurred and maybe the lives that we lived as children, you'll see where you learned what your perspective of money is. And he started the conversation by saying that we typically establish what that is from the ages of 0 to 9. And reflecting back myself, I can see what some of those experiences may have been in my own life as to how those then affected me. Does money really grow on trees and so forth? If I can go back and now try and tap into those feelings and emotions and now address them as an adult, I can maybe start to curb how I'm interacting with funds and money. The other thing is I love this idea of living within our means. I cannot stress enough. If we want to be debt-free, we've got to actually choose a lifestyle to live within our means. And one of the things that was a takeaway from that was how Adam and his wife were able to say, let's take one of our earnings, one of our paychecks, and I'm going to use this as a couple to now pay down our debt. I think that's phenomenal, to not elevate our lifestyle based on the two-income household, but rather take one of those incomes and apply it towards the debt and liberate ourselves from that stress. That's hugely important, and I like that advice. That's something that I would definitely recommend for everyone. In addition to that, I think it was really important to realize how this was impacting their mental state, their emotional state, because they got to that point where obviously after paying off the house, they were then liberated and can start focusing on wealth. And that's a whole different game and something that I think we all should be moving towards. I like the conversation that we had about the children, how they were perceiving and learning this. And now with his children becoming young adults, he's able to see their choices and how they're starting to be so much more fruitful and mindful of how they're using money to plan for their futures. And that as a parent has got to be just so rewarding and beneficial. And I can likewise attribute a lot of my feelings of peace just simply because of my children having chosen to do those same types of things. The last thing I'd like to focus on is this idea of the shred method, getting out there and shredding the debt, becoming liberated from that. I mentioned the comment of you're either living with debt, you're paying it, or you're earning it. And I think we just need to shred it, get rid of it. We need to take that mindset of what can we do to proactively, with a system, a process, eliminate the debt from our lives. And I'm liking the fact that Adam's developed this shred method to enable us to actually proactively find a passionate way of doing this that can be gamified. I like this. This is really, really good. So everyone, this was a great conversation. I'm hoping that you've learned from this personally and professionally. Adam, what would be a final thought that you'd like to add?
The final thought that I would love to add to this convo, Roger, is that our lives are perfectly engineered for the results we're currently getting. And sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow when people are looking at what's going on in their life and they just don't like the results or the fruits on their tree, right? And there was a book years ago called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker.
Yeah.
And in that book, he said, if you want to change the fruits, you must first change the roots. And the roots go back to, what was the money programming you got early on? And was it the truth, or was it your parents' truth at the time and you just accepted it as reality? So our lives are perfectly engineered for the results we're currently getting. We just need to re-engineer things to change if we want to see change in our lives.
I absolutely love that. I was just listening to a short of a book written by Brian Tracy, and he addressed that specifically. Brian Tracy was basically saying it's kind of like Earl Nightingale, what the mind can conceive, the mind will achieve. Yep. Dale Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, all of these people speak to the power of the mind and what it is that we can be doing to really influence our way of seeing life, living life. And very, very well said. I like that. Thank you for that. All right, so here's what I'm going to do to wrap this up. Obviously, I want to encourage you again to go to universalaccounting.com. There it's where you'll find free resources as they relate to you running your business. It's there you'll find the money management course that I spoke of. As well, go to the episode description and take advantage of the Shred Method discount that's available there. In addition, I also want to point out, if you haven't already, to subscribe to the podcast. We'd love to have you subscribe and listen to our episode each and every week as I bring guests on the show, experts in their own right, to help us, in fact, build the premier accounting firm. In doing so, you can also go back with your access and listen to the previous podcast. We've gotten now over 200 episodes that you can go and listen to, ranging on various topics that are specific to your situations, that I'm trusting that you'll basically learn what you need to be doing to work on your business. In addition, I want to invite you to GrowCon. GrowCon is an annual conference where we meet as peers, as owners of bookkeeping, accounting, and tax businesses. We want to basically put on the stage experts for us to learn from. We want to interact with one another as peers and see what we can do to collaborate to take care of ourselves and our clients. And lastly, you get to meet the team here at Universal Accounting Center, those of us that are committed to helping you be in business for yourself, but not by yourself. So definitely join us for GrowCon. Register now, and we look forward to seeing you again in May. Lastly, with regards to this, if you'd like more information about these principles and others that we discuss on the show, feel free to reach out to us directly. You can visit us at universalaccountingschool.com or give us a phone call at 801-265-3777. And always remember this, if it's about accounting, it is universal. Take care and have a great day and be safe out there, everyone.